Christmas Eve, a time for joy, celebration, and togetherness. But for the Sodder family in 1945, it became a night of unimaginable tragedy. In the early hours of December 25th, a fire engulfed their home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. While George and Jenny Sodder and 4 of their children managed to escape, 5 others were never seen again. Authorities declared that the children had perished in the flames, but something didn't add up. No remains were found in the ashes, no bones, no evidence. Their disappearance sparked a mystery that has endured for decades. Was it a tragic accident, a sinister act of revenge, or something far more disturbing? Join us as we uncover the chilling mystery of the Sodder children, a story that leaves more questions than answers. Before the tragedy that would define their legacy, the Sodders were a typical hard-working family, deeply rooted in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George Sodder and his wife Jenny had built a life together, raising 10 children in a close-knit household filled with love and laughter. George was an ambitious man. Born in Sardinia, Italy, he immigrated to the United States as a young boy, seeking a better future. Through determination and hard work, he established a successful trucking company, an achievement that made him a respected figure in the community. Jenny, also an Italian immigrant, was the glue that held the family together. She balanced raising 10 children, ranging in age from toddlers to teenagers, while supporting George's growing business. Life in Fayetteville wasn't without its challenges. The Sodders were part of a small but vibrant Italian immigrant community, which often faced prejudice and tension in the post-war years. But George wasn't one to stay silent. He was fiercely outspoken, especially about his disdain for Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. He criticized Mussolini's regime loudly and frequently, earning both admiration and animosity. In a town where allegiances ran deep, George's views didn't sit well with everyone. He made enemies, some openly, others perhaps in secret. But little did the Sodders know, these tensions might have planted the seeds for the devastating events that would follow. This was the Sodder family, resilient, hardworking, and united. But on that fateful Christmas Eve in 1945, everything changed in the blink of an eye. Christmas Eve, 1945, began like any other festive evening in the Sodder household. The family gathered to celebrate the holiday, their home filled with the warmth of laughter and the glow of their Christmas tree. As the evening wound down, Jenny sent the younger children to bed, while the older ones stayed up a little longer to enjoy the festivities. George and Jenny retired for the night, expecting nothing more than a peaceful holiday. But just after midnight, an unusual phone call shattered the quiet. Jenny answered the ringing phone to hear a woman's voice asking for someone who didn't live there. She recalled the caller's strange laugh before hanging up. Unsettled, Jenny noticed something else. Lights were still on in the house, and the curtains were left open. Assuming the older children forgot to tidy up, she turned off the lights and went back to bed. Then, just a few hours later, Jenny woke again, this time to a loud thud on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. Moments later, the unmistakable scent of smoke filled the air. Jenny and George scrambled to wake their children. 4 of them managed to escape, Sylvia, the youngest, along with John, Marion, and George Jr. But the flames spread rapidly, consuming the wooden home with terrifying speed. 5 of their children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were still inside. George and Jenny tried desperately to save them, but every attempt was met with strange and inexplicable obstacles. The family's ladder, always kept in the same spot, was missing. George's trucks, which he planned to use to climb into the upper floors, mysteriously wouldn't start. Even the phone line, which Jenny had used earlier, had been cut. With no way to reach the children, the family could only watch in horror as their home burned to the ground. By morning, the house was reduced to ashes. Authorities concluded that the 5 children had perished in the fire. But for George and Jenny, the nightmare was far from over. There were no remains, no bones, no evidence of their children's deaths. And the strange events of that night raised far more questions than answers. Was the fire truly an accident, or was it something far more sinister? The mystery of what happened to the Sodder children was only just beginning. In the days following the fire, authorities quickly reached a conclusion. The 5 missing Sodder children had perished in the flames. But George and Jenny Sodder refused to accept this explanation. Something didn't add up. The fire had burned for less than an hour before the house was reduced to ashes. A time frame far too short to completely cremate human bodies, even under extreme conditions. Jenny, determined to uncover the truth, began her own experiments. She burned animal bones in her wood stove to test the authorities' claims. No matter how high the temperature, the bones never disintegrated completely. This raised a chilling question. Why were no bones or remains found in the ashes of her home? As the Sodders searched for answers, strange clues began to emerge. Witnesses came forward with astonishing claims. Some reported seeing the missing children alive and well, hours or even days after the fire. One woman claimed to have seen them in a car driven by strangers as the fire raged. Another witness reported seeing them in a diner the next morning, accompanied by unfamiliar adults who spoke a foreign language. Evidence of foul play also began to surface. George found what appeared to be a pineapple bomb, a crude incendiary device, in the yard. This discovery suggested that the fire may not have been an accident. Even more puzzling, the family's ladder, which had always been kept near the house, was found tossed in a ditch far from the property. Was someone deliberately sabotaging their efforts to save the children? Despite these findings, local authorities seemed uninterested in pursuing these leads. They dismissed the missing remains, the sightings, and the strange evidence as either coincidence or unreliable accounts. But the Sodders weren't ready to give up. They believed their children had been kidnapped and that the fire was a cover-up for something far more sinister. Their quest for answers was only just beginning. Their determination to uncover the truth would lead them to new discoveries and even more haunting questions. For George and Jenny Sodder, the fire that consumed their home was just the beginning of a decades-long search for answers. They refused to believe their 5 children had perished in the flames. Instead, they became convinced the children had been kidnapped, a horrifying possibility tied to George's outspoken political views. But the 2 members of the family feel they've lost too much already. Determined to uncover the truth, the Sodders hired private investigators and followed every lead, no matter how far-fetched. They even consulted psychics, desperate for any clue that might explain their children's disappearance. One theory suggested that George's criticism of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini had made him enemies, both locally and abroad. Could his political views have provoked an act of retaliation against his family? But there was a widespread theory that supported the murder of Benito Mussolini and began an epidemic of deaths by execution. As the years passed, the Sodders' determination only grew. In a bold and public act, they erected a massive billboard along a busy highway near their home. The message was clear. The 5 children were missing, and a reward was offered for any information leading to their return. The billboard became a haunting symbol of their relentless pursuit of the truth, drawing the attention of travelers, journalists, and even skeptics. For George and Jenny, it was more than a plea for help. It was a declaration that they would never give up. Then, in the 1960s, more than 2 decades after the fire, a mysterious photograph arrived in the mail. It showed a young man with striking similarities to Louis Sodder, one of the missing boys. The photograph was unsigned, bearing only a cryptic note on the back: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys, Anin, 0, 1, 3, 2, or 35. The Sodders were stunned. Was this the proof they had been waiting for? They sent the photograph to a private investigator, hoping to trace its origins. But in a cruel twist, the investigator vanished, leaving behind no leads or explanation. The mystery only deepened. Until their deaths, George and Jenny Sodder held on to hope that they would one day be reunited with their children. Their search for the truth defined their lives and left behind one of history's most haunting unsolved mysteries. We are introducing them, Earthen Shell and Jenny Sodder. Were the Sodder children truly kidnapped? Was the photograph genuine or just another cruel hoax? The answers remain elusive, locked away in the shadows of time. The Sodder children's disappearance sparked countless theories, each more compelling and unsettling than the last. Was this a case of kidnapping, political retaliation, or simply a tragic accident shrouded in confusion? One of the earliest theories was that the children had been abducted, and the fire was a deliberate cover-up. Witness accounts seemed to support this idea. Several people reported seeing the children alive, including in a car speeding away from the Sodder home during the fire. However, there was a puzzling absence of any ransom demands, a common motive in cases of child abduction. If the children were kidnapped, why was no money requested? Could the kidnappers have had an entirely different motive? Another chilling theory pointed to George Sodder's political views. An outspoken critic of Benito Mussolini and the Italian fascist regime, George had made enemies in Fayetteville's tight-knit immigrant community. Some suggested the fire was an act of revenge, an attack orchestrated by those who disagreed with George's stance or wanted to silence him. But if this was the case, why take the children? Could they have been collateral damage or the real targets of the attack? While compelling, this theory also lacked definitive proof, leaving it as another piece of the puzzle without a clear resolution. Despite the strange circumstances, some believe the tragedy was just that, a tragic accident. The official explanation was that faulty wiring caused the fire, trapping 5 of the Sodder children inside. Perhaps the lack of remains was due to poor investigative techniques or an oversight in the chaos of the event. However, this theory does little to explain the missing ladder, the cut phone line, or the reports of children seen alive. Even for those inclined to believe it was an accident, too many questions remain unanswered. Each theory offers fragments of truth but leaves behind a trail of uncertainty. Was it a calculated act of foul play, a case of kidnapping, or a tragic misunderstanding compounded by errors and oversights? Recently, scientists have started researching the possibility that poisoning might be associated with reduced production of myeloma. Theories may abound, but none can fully explain the strange and heartbreaking events of that Christmas Eve in 1945. Nearly 8 decades have passed since the Sodder family's Christmas Eve tragedy. Yet the story continues to captivate and perplex. For true crime enthusiasts, it's a haunting tale of unanswered questions and elusive truths. The Sodder children's disappearance remains one of history's most enduring unsolved mysteries, inspiring countless theories, books, documentaries, and discussions among armchair detectives and seasoned investigators alike. For the Sodder family, the search for answers was more than a mystery. It was a lifelong quest. George and Jenny Sodder passed away without ever learning the fate of their missing children. Yet their surviving descendants have carried forward the legacy of perseverance and hope, ensuring the story is never forgotten. Even today, new generations uncover this case and are drawn into its web of intrigue. The lack of closure, combined with its strange twists and unsettling possibilities, makes it a story that lingers in the minds of all who hear it. The Sodder family's pain and persistence remind us of the importance of seeking truth, even when it seems out of reach. Their story stands as a testament to the enduring power of love, hope, and the human spirit in the face of unthinkable tragedy. On Christmas Eve 1945, the Sodder family's life was shattered by a mysterious fire that destroyed their home, and with it, 5 of their children. But the family's grief didn't end with the fire. For decades, George and Jenny Sodder fought tirelessly to uncover the truth, following every lead and challenging every explanation. Despite their efforts, no definitive answers ever emerged. Was it a kidnapping? A malicious plot to take the children away? Was it revenge for George's political views? Or was it simply a tragic accident, misunderstood and mishandled by authorities? The questions still remain, unanswered and haunting. The disappearance of the Sodder children is a riddle that no one has been able to solve, and yet, it continues to captivate people's imaginations. Now, we turn the mystery over to you. What do you believe happened to the Sodder children? Were they taken? If so, why and by whom? Or is it possible that this was all a tragic accident, with no further answers to be found? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let's continue to untangle the lies behind history's darkest stories together.